What on earth have I gotten myself into? Why are these heads bolted together? It's nothing good. I promise you that. This is a little bit of a mess. Not sure what this makes me. It makes me either a fool or a sucker. Call me what you like. I can take it. If you squint your eyes a little bit, look somewhere around ya, and ya, you'll see a couple cracks. Let's see if I can show you exactly what we've got going on here. So, somewhere in this realm, maybe right about there, you can see a little tiny crack. That goes to the outside of the head. Right below it, there's another one. That goes right there. Of course, the other side of this is a head bolt hole. Things here might get a little dicey. If I'd thought about it ahead of time, I would have shown you the steps that got us here. But, in my ADHD brain, it didn't work out that way. This is gonna get interesting. I haven't done one of these repairs in years. As you can tell, I don't own a pressure tester. This actually might work in my favor. Might put that bolt back into place, torque it up, and put that little area under tension. That could help us a little. And I know what you're thinking. Why don't you just go get another pair of heads? They're only $1,800. It's just an LS. These heads are $7,000. If you've got to ask, you can't afford it. I've had these heads sitting on the shelf for years, sitting next to the keys to my Bentley. I'd say my plan here is going to be pretty simple. For my monkey brain and all. Take and grind those cracks out. Grind down deeper just a little bit. The original crack was up here in the head bolt hole. And in the discovery process, I found an external leak right around here. I'll cut that down a little further. There was a previous repair done to these heads. It didn't go to the extent that I'm going to take it. And what we'll do is we'll just eliminate the water jacket in this area. It's not really doing anything. It's not important. So I'll take this down a little further and just fill all of this with weld. And then instead of machine the head bolt hole back to its original height, I'll counterbore it and install a hatted hard head bolt washer, and then leave that permanent inside of the head, and hopefully that'll help distribute some of the load, prevent this from cracking again. The extra weld will help give it a little more rigidity too. It's pretty easy to see why this cracked anyways. It's a little thin in these areas. Wouldn't take much. First, I've got to do a little bit more grinding. Well, I'd say it was pretty cool that I caught that on camera. Little chunk here just flew right off. That's part of a previous repair. I'm gonna say what we're gonna do is gonna work out a lot better. Looks like all this back here is just weld. I might have to grind all of this out. We'll see. The leak was down in the backside. Over there. I hope I don't have to grind this area out. You can see the remnants of the old weld right there. They probably came in with a hole saw, punched out the side of the head, and came in, welded up this little fillet on the back side of the head bolt hole. We're gonna get a little more extreme here. That's the way I like it. I'd say chasing the dragon paid off. Got most of that crack ground out. I think I want to stop grinding here. Instead of chasing down that trough, I'll leave it alone. I'll almost guarantee you that this trough goes all the way around that weld. Good or bad, once upon a time I was actually quite known for these kinds of repairs. Used to be pretty good at this. I don't like the looks of this. It seems that there's actually a crack that runs all around this plug. Doesn't go up to the surface, but it's right on the edge of the weld. So since we didn't get full penetration, you can actually see the line right there. So look right here and watch that reflection change. You'll see that little crack. I'll bet you if I keep grinding, I'm gonna end up chasing that crack all the way around this plug. I think it might be smart to just leave that there, weld this up, finish the repair, and then revisit this at the end. If it ends up leaking, which I think it will, that will be pretty easy to take care of, but it's best left alone. We're going to use this to our advantage. So one other thing occurred to me. Water flows up through the block into the head right down here. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to block this off and eliminate the water passage right here, but if you come over here, we can put this side of the head on the back of a block and it wouldn't matter. Let's see. There we go. Front, back. Blocked off. I think that's what we'll do. Original plan was good. Just had to think it through. We'll kill the water jacket here, weld that up, it'll all be fine. Except we'll just make this the back of the head. So this will get switched from the right head to the left head. All's good in the world. Lucky me. Come on. I just swept. I hate this. Now we're just gonna try and cook some of the crap out of this. A little preheat won't hurt. No, I'm no engineer. But I'd say this is degree worthy right here. See, I'm only what? 4'8". Now these are a little tall, I've got to weld them up on end. I had to pull out the sawhorses. This should work out just fine. Well, I found the bottom of that bolt. That's annoying. So I'd say the plan here is get these two little windows down here. Don't touch that. Get these two little windows welded up. I'll let this cool down. We'll give this a quick pressure test. Save myself from having to redo everything. I'm afraid what's going to happen is if I put too much metal into this all at once, the other side of the head bolt hole will crack. I'll just have to be careful. Not too concerned about how it looks. It's all going to get machined. This thing's about 7 years old. Excuse the patina. I'm welding at 185 amps. Frequency is 50 hertz. And I've got 50% cleaning action. Some friends of mine think those settings are pretty screwed up, but it's worked for me in the past. For a very long time, actually. It's not going to give you the prettiest welds. Without the helium, these would be pretty gray. Excuse this monstrosity of a torch. Using a number 6 gas lens cup, serrated 1/8 inch tungsten. I'm using Blue Demon 4043. I'll probably come in and cap this off with 5356 just so it looks nice when machined. If I rush through this, all that would happen is all this heat's going to pull on the casting. You know, you think you're doing well, then, you're letting it cool. 5-10 minutes later, you hear a giant pop, come back, and your hopes and dreams are all ruined. Then you gotta start over. You get mad. You end up hating life, like I do. I've got one of the windows welded up. I think it's almost time to start adding a little material into here. That crack's not growing, so I don't think it's gonna crack, but we shall see. When you're filling in holes like this, or you're welding on castings, a lot of times you'll pick up porosity like that. Sometimes it just doesn't melt in right away. Instead of shoving filler into there, let it wet out, walk your torch around. Eventually, you'll be able to cook that out to the top. That'll go away pretty easily. A lot of times if it's gonna fight you, there would be a nice little black blob of crap sitting in the middle of it. Don't shove rod into there. You're not gonna get rid of it by doing that. It will disappear, but you're just covering it in filler. That also happens when you're filling in a hole like this. So don't rush through it, take your time. If it takes a couple minutes, it takes a couple minutes. Not a big deal. Thankfully, it's just the end of the head. Not welding up a guide bore or welding up a broken chamber or anything like that. Stakes are a little lower here. Well, there we go. Those windows welded up. We'll be able to put some pressure to this now. See whether or not we're making any progress. Well, I expected that. It's kind of a blessing. If it didn't pull and crack there, it would have cracked somewhere else. That's pretty easily accessible. I'll have to come in through the bottom. Well, I've got that all ground out. The crack's right along the middle of my new gouge. Change the end on my torch. That will give me plenty of access here, and I'll be able to just wash a weld in and then fill the top of the head bolt hole. Work my way up. It's gonna go okay. My other option is come in through the top of the head, though my movement's a little more limited. I'll probably do this towards the end. Give myself a little more room to weld up into here. That'll do okay. Kind of limited when you have a 26 torch. Everything will be just fine. Has to be. I'm so tired. Things can get a little weird when you're talking about welding up a crack, especially here when we're down in a hole. Instead of gouging out the whole crack and having a nice big V or open area I've got to fill in with weld, I like to grind it until it's very thin. Then I'll just use the heat of the arc to melt the crack out. Then I'll just go through, fill in the little keyhole that I've got, shove some filler in, and just make my way up towards the top. Once that's done, I know that it's going to be pretty solid. Did a little bit more blending, shoved in a little bit more filler. Some places just washed the weld around with no filler. Did a little bit cleaner of a job here. I don't see any other cracks on the bottom. Kind of a mess down there, but it'll be okay once it's all machined out. A lot of this original weld is still gonna remain after machining. We're making pretty good progress. Just waiting for it to cool down enough so I can pressure test it again. All that welding's done a good enough job of compromising the head gasket right here. Not having a bolt holding the heads together isn't helping. Well, it's sealed up. Ignore that air. This head gasket leak's getting worse. But no longer leaking. It's gonna be fine, everybody. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. Tortured this tungsten just a little bit. Got a little toasty. But it's okay. It's able to come in here, get everything washed around, put a nice little bead in. I also came in from the other side, built up the top of the head bolt hole. We're going to leave this nice and thick. I think that'll give us a little support, help keep it from pulling on the casting and cracking again. I won't even bother grinding out that weld or cutting out that weld once we get to the machining process. Fill this whole area in, and then we'll just go machine the end of the head off. Come through, remachine the head bolt hole on both sides. That'll only take a few minutes, and from that point we can move on to normal machining. It's gonna be alright. From time to time I know a little bit about nothing. I'd call this a win. Don't ask me to do this for you. Lose my number. Don't at me. Not bad for only a 200 amp machine. Now I'm just doing a little build up. It's just seat time at this point. Glad it wasn't any more difficult. This was, I would say, 10 being the most difficult. I'd call this a 4. It just takes time. It wasn't particularly hard. Just time. Let's let this cool off. Come back in 5 minutes. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's looking pretty good. I tried welding this edge. Started acting a little funny. So I shoved some foil down the head bolt hole. That'll hold some of the argon in place. It'll weld much nicer there. I've got maybe another 1/4 inch to build up. That's gonna go pretty fast. I'll probably do 2 pieces of filler rod at a time. Gonna switch back to my gas lens. There's no need to have this extra long cup anymore. It's looking pretty good. Now the hole's closed up. I'm gonna let this head cool down a little bit longer. Come back in maybe 10 minutes and start welding again. Couple more passes right here and we're done. What a lot of work. This kind of stuff isn't for everybody. Believe me, I've screwed up a lot of heads before I could do this. I'm a little bit out of practice. It's been a while. And my welder is on its last legs. I think I'm gonna buy one of those Everlast 230 Typhoons. I've got some features that kind of interest me. It's either that or I'll buy just a regular 315 EX. It's due time. I've had this welder for maybe 7 years. Well, it's gonna work. That's all sealed up. That thoroughly screwed up that head gasket. Quite a bit of welding. The weld was solid. It's gonna be alright. Keep telling myself that. I already checked the whole rest of the head. There were no cracks anywhere else. Was this worth it? I don't know. I'd say, considering that you'd have to spend about $4,000 to buy new heads, if you could find them, get them CNC'd, get O-rings cut into them. Actually, these have receiver grooves. Buy a new valve train, set it up for the rocker arms. It's just not worth it. So, for a minor repair like this, I'd say this was worth the time. Well, there we go. This next step is easily one of the most important steps. So I'm going to show you a tool that I made. It's just an air hammer attachment with a little ball brazed onto it. And I'm just going to peen all of these welds fairly flat. Put a decent amount of heat into this head. I'll guarantee that this deck right about here has been distorted quite a lot. After I do the peening, we'll definitely see that this whole area here is going to be real sunk. It won't matter. This won't be used for anything. It'll just be cosmetic. What a mess. I am disgusted. Where's my air hammer? There it is. Okay. This is that little tool I made. See if I can't one-hand this. Nope, I can't. All right. That's just a chisel or something. Crudely brazed on a little ball. That's all it takes. It's a little dinged up. I must have hit something hard with it. All we gotta do, peen this down. The head's still hot. Never skip this step. I'd say I've done this one too many times. I'm over it. I wouldn't complain if this was the last time I've done this. Remember when I said this plug might be a problem? Might crack once we're all done? Well, it didn't do that, except I cracked it while we were peening. That's not a big deal. I'll just grind that old weld out, go down a little ways, and weld it back up. Check this out. Big leaker. Oh well. Well, shame on me for forgetting that plug was in there. It's nothing to write home about, but got a little weld weaved into there. We'll peen that down. Move on. There we go. We're set up. Looks stable. What's the worst that'll happen? It flies out. So you can see this head had some receiver grooves machined into it. This is not the factory port from RHS. It's an aftermarket port. Unfortunately, these are irreplaceable. Let's finish fixing it. I'll probably have to cut about 20 thousandths off of this to get it to clean up. The back spacing on the face of this head isn't going to matter. So really I could cut off as much as I want, which makes it quite easy. Keep cutting till it looks good. I'll guarantee you that this plug is about 10 or 15 thousandths lower than the rest of the face. I might not clean that up. We'll see. Let's call that 0. Nope, my eyeball micrometers were right. It is 20 thousandths. Well, that's good. Guess it's time to rip off that for reference only sticker. Let's see, 15 thousandths. It's vibrating a little bit. I think it can take it. I hate it. But it's working. That weld sure machines like crap. Nice and smooth, but I think we'll try some WD-40. See if I can get that to look a little shinier. This is a uncoated carbide insert, so it's not going to leave the best finish over a weld like that. Well, lopped off 29 thousandths. Sprayed some WD-40 on there, that should help. One little void right there. Don't stick your finger in the cutter. That's just along the edge of a weld, not a void in the weld itself. So far, looks like there's very little to no porosity in the weld. With my welding track record lately, that's actually quite an accomplishment. The WD-40 seemed to help with the finish just a little bit. I'll probably hit this with a Scotch-Brite. That'll hide a lot of that welding. You know what, actually? I'm not going to touch that with anything. That finish is actually pretty good. Lucky me. Got it turning at 1800-ish RPM. Making 2 passes. Figured out my step over. No line. I have a lot of cleanup to do on this head. A lot of wire wheeling, a lot of polishing. Well, considering I've never had any formal training, that came out pretty okay. Well, this roughing end mill is the right size. Unfortunately, it's not a center cut. I think the head bolt hole is just exactly the right size, so it should be okay. Be able to cut apart some of that weld. It's really hard to show you, so I'm going to do this off camera. The weld spot face down. I've got to cut a small counter borer. So I've got an end mill hung out quite a ways. We're going to machine the inside of the head bolt hole for this flanged washer. That way the head bolt hole has some support and it doesn't crush under torque. Clearance is clearance, Clarence. Got that head bolt hole spot face down just a little bit further. I've actually spot faced it down to the thickness of this flanged washer. I've got it on a guide installer. A little bit of grease on the, probably a little bit too much grease on the leading edge of the flange, and we're going to get this tapped into place. Well, that was a little embarrassing. The bottom portion of it's actually quite thin, and it shrunk. I had my press fit wrong. It shrunk enough to grab my driver. So, That thing's installed, it's permanent. I had to come in with a carbide drill and just open up the bottom of the leading edge of the washer. Not a big deal. I already stuck a bolt in there. Fits perfectly. And these things are fixed. I don't ever want to do this ever again. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Since I know you guys are going to complain that we didn't see an after pressure test, here we go. Perfect. And before anybody complains in the comments, the repair doesn't leak. Now, have a good weekend.